Well, everybody, welcome back to the Trick Podcast of Joy and Gosa TV on this beautiful Saturday. It is indeed the best day of the week, except for tomorrow. So, how are you guys? By the way, I'm playing with a few sound effects. Let's see if they even work. Okay, there you go. And then, how about that one? That's probably my favorite one, right? The air horn. But I was thinking about. Actually, I was listening to a podcast with Tyler Perry. Shout out to Tyler Perry. Let's see. Plus? Where's he at plus? There it is. Medina, right? And he was talking about the dream will never die, or the dream. I liked it even better. He says the dream will carry you. The dream will carry you. And I thought that was a really good title for this particular show and some of the thoughts that I had. Just because I think that it is easy for many of us to not, I guess, to lose sight of the dream when you are not where you want to be. And you have to kind of really look to those inspirational speakers and inspirational moments so that you can remember that the dream will carry you. The dream will make room for you. The dream that God's put in you is there for a reason. And I guess just today has been a day of a lot of motivational input from, as I said, a lot of these amazing stories. I was listening to Oprah, Steve Harvey, Tyler Perry, Joel Osteen, all of these different speakers that have amazing stories of God, of faith. And it started with Steve Harvey. He was doing a show, and there was a young man. Well, he was maybe in his 40s, a man that was in his studio. And maybe you've seen this. And he and his wife were there. I think he's from Jamaica, and he had just been laid off from work. And that happened to me. It happened to so many of us. And so he was pretty down, and he was just saying, he was asking Steve Harvey to kind of pray for him, I guess, just to encourage him. What can he do to not lose his motivation? And it was amazing because Steve Harvey was saying, well, what do you love to do? And he said, I love to cook. And then he said, what were you doing before in this previous job? He said, I was a sales rep for, I think it was for soda or drink, something like that. And then Steve Harvey's like, well, maybe that's why God did that. He pushed you out so that you could follow your dream. And long story short, Steve Harvey made some calls, and they got him into a culinary school. This man is 40 years old. I think they had 2 adopted kids, him and his wife from Jamaica. They live here in the area, in the LA area. And so Steve Harvey and some of his contacts got him a $15,000 scholarship for 1 semester at culinary school, and then a second semester based on his grades. And man, everyone was just tearing up. So was I. Just of thankfulness and how God keeps your dream alive, right? How, like I said, I mean, just your dream will carry you. And I think that just that story was so powerful to me because sometimes our dreams are so buried underneath us, to-dos or being laid off or all these kinds of struggles or just losing sometimes sight of what God has put in us. But the dream will carry us. The dream will keep you alive. I love how Matthew 5 says that we ought to let our light shine before men so that our Father in heaven will be glorified. And I just love that, how we can't let our light be dimmed, and yet we sometimes do, right? I mean, when we go through layoffs or when we are dealing with financial or personal stress, our light can dim, our light can stop shining. And I think that even in those times, God uses those opportunities to refine us, to make us really know who He is. I was listening to Oprah give her testimony about being in the movie The Color Purple when she was, I think, maybe in her 20s. I thought this was maybe a good encouragement to many of you, and I know it was to me. She was saying that she felt overweight, and I think, as I said, she was in her 20s, and so she went to a fat camp, she called it. I didn't call it that. She called it a fat farm. And she was running on the track, and then she heard this noise, and it was her thighs. This is her testimony, okay? I'm not saying this. Just hitting up against each other, making this noise, and she thought it was someone that was behind her. She started to just cry, just feeling so unworthy, and no one was calling her back for movies, and this is before she became who she is now. And then suddenly this lady comes out of the fat farm. Again, this is what she called it, not me. And she said, hey, there's some guy named Spielberg on the phone. And she's like, what? And so then Steven Spielberg, who, by the way, when I was at USC, I got to see a lot of the work that he did with Star Wars and George Lucas. But anyway, so he called her, And he said to her, "If you lose 1 more pound, you're not getting this part." So, can you come to the studio tomorrow? I think she was in Wisconsin, and so she flew back to LA, and then she got the part, and they showed the film. It was ironic, as she said that on her way back to the airport, she stopped by Dairy Queen and got a 3-scoop ice cream cone in case she had lost half a pound. And it just was so powerful to remember. And then they showed a clip of her movie, The Color Purple, which, I mean, is so revolutionary, talking about slavery. And it was so powerful just to hear her story of perseverance, of letting, again, as I named this podcast, letting the dream keep you alive, or never letting the dream die, or the dream will carry you. I think that we have to always remember that dream, that calling, that passion, that God is always there to remind us of who He is. And why is this under music? I don't know what music is going on here. Let's see. Is there music? I don't hear any music. Why is this under music? Okay. Well, I'm not sure. Tell me if you hear any music there. VH is dead. I don't hear any music, but maybe I am missing something. So, music category. Oh, got you. Oh, because I am a producer. So that's why it's under music. I'm a producer, but I also podcast and do motivational speaking. So thank you for asking. Yeah, I do a lot of music production, mostly Christian hip hop, Christian rap, and hip hop, positive spiritual messages, positive messages of faith in God. So yes, but just listening to her testimony was so encouraging, because it was just reminding me of how we have to let our dream speak for us, and letting our dream carry us. Because as I said, sometimes whether we are music producers or Twitch streamers on Twitch, and you see so many people that lose sight of their dream, and so you have an epidemic of drugs, or of the opium generation, or the opium addiction, the opium crises, or you have, of course, a sexual promiscuity crisis that is happening to a lot of people, especially young people, on Twitch and in many other channels, OnlyFans and pornography and Pornhub and all these places where people hide their dreams, where they're trying to cope with their loss of their dream, with the fact that perhaps someone killed their dream, or maybe they blame themselves that they haven't done what they wanted to do in life. And yet we have to keep remembering that dream is always there, and we let the dream carry you to the next place, because God has put a dream there for a reason. As I said, Matthew 5 says to let your light shine before men. And that light, that fire that is in you is there for a reason, is there to bring peace and love, and to bring hope, and to bring encouragement to other people. And sometimes we have so many things that discourage us, and we have to persevere in the middle of being laid off, when you can't get ahead financially, when you can't even pay for an Uber to go out to lunch. I mean, I have friends that I'll just say, hey, let's go get some food, and they just say, bro, I just can't even afford to get some McDonald's. And so when you are in the middle of that kind of financial trials, it's easy to lose your dream. It's easy to lose sight of your hopes and your passions and your calling upon life. And yet the Bible, I always love the story of Joseph. I think many of us can relate to Joseph. In the Bible, he was one of Abraham's 12 sons who was sold to slavery by his own brothers, left as dead. And here he was, this young man who had dreams of having the stars and the moon and the sun bow down to him, and to be a blessing to his own parents and to his own brothers. And yet, because of his dream, his brothers thought that he was full of pride and ego, and so they sold him to some Arab slave owners. And so they took him to Egypt, and so there he became basically just a peasant or a prisoner. And everyone was mocking him and saying, oh, look, where's the dreamer, right? Who your father bought you this beautiful robe. And yet, and you could say, I think that all of us would probably agree that that was the end of his dream. And so I would like to have a civil conversation. Yes, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're here to encourage people in terms of their faith and what they believe and don't believe in atheism, agnosticism, or any other. A lot of people these days, when it comes to faith, I guess I do want to go back to what I was talking about, but just to maybe just address, or not address, but just to speak to the lack of faith. I think that a lot of times, I don't know, of course, the particular story of VH's dad, but just from my experience, 30 years of working with a lot of young people or people of all ages that have left their faith or never had faith, it really comes down to trauma and pain, disappointment, or maybe for some who are more scientific and more left brain, they have a problem believing just in anything that's not, quote, science, that's not logical, a talking serpent and a people coming back from the dead, and they're not into anything that is not concrete. And yet I always think about love and hope and even just outer space and these things that even scientists can't really understand. And so yeah, lack of faith, kind of rude, right? Exactly. So again, people can have all kinds of faiths, and I don't know, like I said, in everybody's particular case, but many people will say that I lack faith. I just don't have faith. They will use that language to say, and I lost faith. There are a lot of people that say that they're deconstructing their faith, or that they believe in themselves, or as I said, that they are more scientific or more, they either have trauma or it depends. There's so many ways that people can, of course, express their own process with God or with a lack of God. Maybe they were raised very strict. It really depends, right? It's hard to go into all the ways in which people express kind of their understanding or lack of understanding or different understanding of God. And so, but anyway, getting back to Joseph and what I was mentioning, the idea of letting your dream guide you. So Joseph is here in the gutter, here in jail, with this dream that he has. God's given him this dream to bless his parents, to bless his own family. And yet here he is, basically left for dead. And so then, if you know the story, he begins to hear that the baker, basically the people that he was in jail with, they had dreams. And they were maybe nightmares even. And so Joseph's spiritual dream, you could say, or spiritual gift was to interpret dreams. And so these men, of course, were troubled. And so they went to Joseph and said, hey, Joseph, what do you think this means? And their dreams came true, or Joseph's interpretation of their dreams came true. And so they believed that Joseph had something special about him, that there was something really unique. And so people began to talk positively of Joseph. And so then when the king had a dream, everyone was scared, because if they didn't interpret the dream properly, then people would often be killed by the king just out of anger and frustration. And so you have this really crazy situation where Joseph is there, and you could say that he was afraid for his life. What if he misinterpreted the dream and he would have been killed, right? And there goes the dream. What about my dream, God? And then so the king has a dream, and they call Joseph because he had a good reputation. And Joseph interprets the dream, and it comes true. And the king brings Joseph to be second in command and to oversee all of the financial, how amazing is this? The financial dealings of the king and of the kingdom of Egypt. So he was basically second in command to only the Pharaoh. And so Joseph becomes this administrator who is administrating the financial part of the kingdom. And so then there's this this famine in the land. And his family, check this out, his family, his brothers that had sold him to slavery, come to him, and they don't even know that it's him. They don't recognize him. And they're begging him, because he's the administrator of all the land, of all the grain, of all the flour, stuff they need to survive. They come to him and they say, would you please help us? And Joseph just recognizes his brothers and his own family, and he begins to cry, but he can't show that, right? And so then he comes back, and long story short, he eventually reveals himself, and he says, I am your brother. And even though Satan or you meant this for evil, God meant it for good. And he blesses them, and he adopts them. He brings them into the land. He gives them the grain and the flour. They survive, and they become kind of the you could say, the first family of Egypt. How amazing is that, right? And I guess the point of that story, many things, but back to the idea of the dream will carry you. I mean, Joseph had a dream that God had given him, literally, right? This dream, this vision that he had to be a blessing to his own parents. And when he's in the gutter and he's being sold to slavery and he's being accused of all these things wrongly, or he's afraid for his life, he could have easily lost a dream. I think most of us would have lost that dream or lost hope. And when I was an immigrant, I mean, I'm an immigrant, but when I was a young man and I was in school and I remember when I was maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, I didn't speak the language. I speak English now, but I didn't speak a word of English when I came to this country from Nicaragua, where I was born in early 80s. And so I had no clue. And I remember crying, speaking of panic and fear and all that. I remember crying. I was in first grade. I was, 6, 7 years old? Maybe more like 8. And because I couldn't understand anything that the teachers were saying or the students were saying. And in those days, everybody was blonde, blue-eyed, looked nothing like me with my blue eyes, right? And that didn't bother me. My point is that no one spoke English. There was no Hispanic, Latino culture. And so I could have lost a dream. I had a dream. I've always had a dream to speak, to motivate, to sing. I'm a singer. I'm a preacher. I'm a musician. I'm a creative, a producer, as I've said. But I knew that God had a dream. And so my grandma, who raised me, she cleaned homes her whole life to put me through school and buy me food and love me and care for me since I was 7, 8 years old. She had a friend from church, I believe, or maybe from cleaning homes, or perhaps both. And she was an aide, a teacher's aide at that same school where I was at. And so she talked to her and she said, would you basically mentor or tutor my grandson? And so I would go to her house. My grandma and I would go to her house. We'd walk to her house, which was maybe like half a mile away from our apartment. And every Saturday I would just sit there with her and she would just teach me English words and help me through grammar and the alphabet and things that back then there was no like English only classes or ELD or dual language. I mean, it was just sink or swim. And I mean, now I speak both languages. I even know a little bit of a couple other things. And God just held me and kept the dream alive so that I could be a blessing to my parents, a blessing to my church, a blessing to anyone online, to one person, 2 people, whoever it is. It doesn't matter. I don't have a lot of followers or any of that. But I know that God has given me a dream. And that's always been there since I was a young boy. But God had to provide people to be there and to keep that dream alive. And I think all of us have those same stories. Now I've been married almost 30 years. I have a beautiful family. My wife, who loves me, of 30 years. We have 3 college graduates who love Jesus, who are professionals, who are amazing young men, who haven't got young men and women. One is studying in Italy right now, studying abroad in her last semester in school. She's studying psychology. The other one has been a model, and she won all kinds of pageants here in the area, in the LA area. And my point is that we have a blessed life. We have an amazing life full of joy and peace and impact, and now working with a lot of young people, as I said, in the area of both in mentoring and also, of course, preaching in the church and encouraging, and also music production. And so I have been, I just heard maybe the dog was back there, but it's been an amazing journey, and there's more still that I know God wants to do, and I know that's true of all of us. But we have all had those moments. I mean, when I was in 6th grade, 6 years old, of course, I couldn't quite say, oh, wow, this is going to be bad, or this is going to be terrible, or my life is over. Of course, you have no concept, right? I mean, I'm just a little young boy. But I mean, my life could have ended there, right? I could have gotten so lost in the educational system, and obviously kids learn the language, right? So, I mean, I'm not being too dramatic here, but God provided a way. And then, I mean, there have been even just the last, I would say 10 years. I remember when I was working at the church at USC, it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I was doing an amazing job, at least I thought. And then one day, the pastor and some of the leadership came and said, we're going to let you go because we don't think you're doing a good job in this one area, blah, blah. You're doing great in these things. But I got fired. And I remember, here's what's amazing, and I hope this encourages someone. I remember in that moment, that was my dream job. I was working at USC. I was wearing a suit. I was hanging out with amazing students, helping the homeless, helping people in need, being a spiritual pastor. I was pastor slash administrator. And I remember that day crying on my way home to my wife. I told her, I don't know what I'm going to do, not only financially, but I thought this was going to be my dream career for the rest of my life. And I remember, though, one of the leaders that came and sat at my desk and told me that I was gone, she said to me afterwards, she said, David, God has something greater for you than you being here. God has something better for you. And I thought, how can that be? This is my dream. This is the better. This is all that I've ever wanted. And yet she was right. It took a while, but I believe that right now, it's been a while since that day, but I am convinced that right now what's happening, the way I'm living my life, and not even halfway there yet, this is better. She was right. I remember listening to Steve Harvey talking to this young man that I was telling you about. Well, he was 40, but that he was a chef, or he loves cooking. He said that since he was a young boy, well, he got let go, if you missed maybe the beginning of the show. So Steve Harvey, I was watching this show where Steve Harvey was mentoring or giving advice to, you know how he does it, giving advice to this 40-year-old young man, I consider him a young man, that had just gotten laid off from his sales job. I think he sold, what was it? I think it was like soda or some sort of something like that, something dealing with the food industry. And so he was really down. He was just asking Steve Harvey for motivation, like, how do I stay motivated? And then Steve Harvey said, what do you love to do? He said, cooking. Then why are you doing this? He's like, well, pay the bills and blah, blah, blah. And I'm afraid. He's like, yeah, fear is the American or America's or the West number one problem is we're afraid, right? I mean, I thought, man, he's so right? We're so afraid of losing our little opportunity or a job or this position, or afraid to step out and to trust God because of many reasons. And so he said to him, he said, God sometimes pushes us when we don't want to leave the nest. And I think that's what happened to me when I was at USC. God had to push me. I probably would have stayed there for the rest of my life. And who knows, maybe that's what God wanted. And that would have been a blessing. I thought it was the best job ever. I was making great money, working for God. I mean, all these things that I really loved. And yet the dream carried me. And that dream continues. And sometimes God has to push us out of the nest. And sometimes it's scary and it's rough and it's very painful. I mean, I was in tears. My beautiful wife, I was telling her, love, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was unemployed for a year after that. And we had a bunch of debt, like $30,000 of debt. And it was so scary, as every month, every few months, we saw our credit card bills go up and up, and she was working, but I was trying everything. I applied everywhere. And it wasn't until the very end that I finally, and a lot of it was me. I had to reframe my mind because I was maybe going this way. And even though I thought that was God's will, obviously God didn't think so. So he had to take me out of this path that I thought was so amazing and blah, 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 and push me out to his will, even though it was so painful and we had to take out a loan and then we paid it off and now we're debt free. But it was so painful in the moment to cry, to feel like a failure, as a man, right? You're a provider, you're a husband. We had 3 kids and they were young. And I mean, these are real concerns that we all carry, right? As men, as just humans. And yet God was there and he brought me to a next place and the next place and the next place. And I know that he still has a long way to go. The dream will carry you. That dream carries us. We can't give up just because in the moment you're in jail or maybe you gave into drugs or you're broke or you got fired, or maybe you are like Joseph, kind of in the gutter, in the dungeon of your dreams, or you can't even afford a combo number 1 at McDonald's. And you're like, man, I know I'm meant for greatness, but sometimes we always have to persevere. We always have to endure. And as I said, Matthew 5 is always an amazing, I think, a guiding light for us that says, let your light shine before men. Basically, don't hide your light. Don't dim your light. Don't let that light ever go out. Light the fire again. 2 Timothy 1 says to fan into flame that fire. that God put in you. And I love that passage in 2 Timothy 1, where it says to fan into flame the gift that came through the laying on of hands from your grandmother and your mother. My story, many of us, right? We have that same story. Our parents have been praying for us. Like I said with my grandma and this teacher that she found, my grandma said, I need to help my grandson. It's not even her own son. But yet she was committed to seeing my dream come true. God put her in my life for a reason. And then God put, I remember her name was Maria Teresa. God put Maria Teresa, this teacher's aide, in my life to help me get through this major concern and blah, blah. And God used her. And that's why I love that passage. It says, fan into flame the gift that God has put in you, that has been in you since your mom and your grandma prayed for you by the laying on of their hands. God has brought your mom, your grandma, your father, teachers, mentors into your life. They have believed in you. God is going to see you through. But we have to fan into flame that gift. What does that mean? You have to persevere. Now, notice, and you have to keep using your gifts, even in the gutter. What I love about Joseph in that story is that even though he was down and out, you could say, he was still using his gifts. Isn't that awesome? When these two, I think it was it wasn't the cupbearer. I think he was was he a plumber? Or maybe he was a potter. And then it was the baker and the something else. I forget the other guy. There were these two guys. And when they had these dreams, Joseph could have said, nah, I'm done with that. I don't preach. I don't sing. I don't use my gifts anymore. I mean, look at me. Look at us. We're just waiting to be killed here. Instead, Joseph kept using his dreams, his gifts, even in the gutter. You can't stop letting your light shine. Maybe your light isn't going to shine as bright as it once did, or in the moment maybe it's shining at 5, 10, 20, 50%. You have to keep shining for God. You have to keep believing in that dream. The dream will see you through. The dream will open doors for you. Like it did for Joseph, like it did for me, like it did for you. We have to keep standing and believing that God has put a dream and he will see us through. He who began a good work in you, says Philippians 1, will complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. It might take a long time. It might take 50, 70, 90 years. But we never stop believing. We never stop thinking. We never let the dream die. We believe the dream will carry us. God will carry us. The dream is just another way to put God, right? Just to say, God will carry me. The dream, what is your dream? We all know, right? Now, people can say, oh, I don't have a dream. But a lot of times it's because that dream has been dimmed or we went through seasons. I could say that when I was unemployed, actually, ironically, I think my dream was more alive than ever, because when we're in crisis, we get really clear. When we're in crisis is when we really clarify and simplify our lives. When we have too much comfort, those are the times that I hardly learn anything. Those are the times I'm mostly worried about, when everything's going well, because I lose that edge. We lose that focus. When did David sin with Bathsheba? When he was home from war, just kind of hanging out on the rooftops, and boom. We have to be more concerned. We learn the most when we're in crisis. I always tell people, thank God for your crisis, because once it's gone, that's when temptation really comes. We think that temptation is when we're in crisis. That's when we can lose it all. And it's true. But it's even more dangerous when we're in comfort, because you begin to walk on the rooftop with a bottle of wine or a glass of wine or with whatever it is, and boom, you give in. And you lose your kingdom, you lose your calling, you lose your way. But when you're in the gutter, when you're in the dungeon, when you're going through, when you're fired from a job, when you are without money for even combo number 2 at McDonald's, is number 2 cheaper than 1? I don't know. Probably not. But you don't have any money for even that. That's when you have to hang on to God. And you have to believe that he's working behind the scenes to get you to the right place. When I was preaching to 5 people at my church just about 7 years ago, I thought, God, but you've called me to greatness. I've always known that I am called to preach and to sing to greatness, whether it's 1, 10, or 15. I've done 1, I've done 5. I don't care about the numbers. My point is that we all know, right, that dream that we have, that's not for our glory, that's not for selfish gain, or that's not for money or fame. And if it is for that, then God will delay that dream. That's another thing that he does. He will delay the fulfillment of the dream until you pass these integrity checks. I can say that a lot of times, oh, I didn't receive the fulfillment of my dream because I was doing it for my glory. That's why I love Matthew 5. It says that we ought to let your light shine before men for the glory of God. Let's see, I'm going to pull up that verse just so we can read it together because it's so powerful, especially for those of us who can tend to be a little more like, well, hey, look at me, God. Look how amazing I am. Me. Like my brother Eric. I think he's here in the chat still, right? God bless you, my brother Eric. He did this amazing song. I remember Eric back in the day. I mean, when we deal with all that me stuff, God delays the blessing because why would he want to bless us more if we can't even handle little blessings, right? And so it says right here, let's see if I can get to this, put it on the screen for you. Let's see here. I think there it is, right? Let's see. Hey, look at that. Let me see if my little sound effects work. Yeah, okay. How about that? So now, back 20 years ago, I did a bunch of short-term projects, mostly building schools, teaching English. I went to my native Nicaragua. We built a 2-story school. We did a baseball league. Then I went to Hungary, went to Russia, went local to many cities here in the U.S. But of course, my dream, obviously, even now as an adult, is to bless my country, right, of Nicaragua. But I haven't really had a revelation of how yet. And I still don't. I can't say like I totally know. And I don't think it's maybe necessary for us to know, as long as God knows and as long as we're obedient to God's heavenly call. So then, ever since I've been a part of my beautiful church of VO, shout out to VO DTSA, downtown Santa Ana. Yeah. Oh, let me tell you a sad story. It's sad. Okay, that's not the one I meant to press. Here it is. This is the dream. Speaking of dreams. So, Panama is a neighboring country to Nicaragua, all part of the Central American Isthmus, right? The Central American Isthmus, yes. And so, Mexico, and then there's Guatemala, blah, blah, anyway, you know, right? And then Colombia, Venezuela, South America, Brazil, Argentina, etc. So Panama is one of the countries where VO has a base or a church that is thriving. And the young man, I don't know him yet, but I'd love to meet him. He's been going around Instagram, making the rounds with this one clip of him preaching. And he's a young man. And see, here's something even funny. You know how we obviously all have a look, right? Mexican and Central American, African American, Hindu, not Hindu, but Arab or Indian or whatever. Right? We all have white, of course. We all have a look, right? So when I see people from Central America, I can recognize that they look like me because we have different roots, right? Roots because we're Central American, so it's not just Aztec. It's mixed with Mayan. It's mixed with maybe some Aztecs, obviously some Spanish, some Native, blah, blah, blah. So we can see each other like, oh, so when I saw this young man, I'm assuming he's from Panama, so I don't really know. But just looking at him and even the way he speaks the language, because the Spanish also is different, same language, but, you know, different tones, different rhythms and cadences and all that stuff. And so I thought, you are Central American. And I've always known that VO, Victory Outreach, has a chapter, as I said, or a church, a base in Panama. Panama is maybe an hour and a half from Nicaragua, maybe more, like 3 hours. It's not very far. Currently, this is another, speaking of the dream will carry you and how God works. Currently, I'm going to be teaching a class. Let me put this back on the screen here. There we go. I'm going to be teaching a class online through VETI, which is Victory Equipping Training Institute, which is like the Bible college per se of the church that I'm a part of. Guess where the class is being taught, or through Zoom? Panama. So next week, I'm going to start teaching a class to students in Panama. I have no idea what God is doing. But my dream, I also sing and lead worship and write songs and preach and all that stuff, right? I mentor young people, create content, produce, blah, blah. Man, I don't know. God is so good, right? Who is to say that we won't bring all of our rappers? I'm working with amazing young people, Christian rappers that just love Jesus, so talented, including my brother Eric. We'll get together, my brother Eric, soon here. Imagine if my church, my home church, or a group of churches here from VO US, VO International, will go to Nicaragua through some connection. And we'll bless, and I will be able to preach and sing to 1, 20, 30, 50, 1,000, who knows, people from my native Nicaragua. My goodness. Bringing rap in Spanish and English to young people that are dealing with addictions, that are dealing with gangs, that are dealing with the opioid crisis, that are dealing with depression, suicidal thoughts, with nihilism, whatever it may be, hopelessness. I mean, can God do that? Of course he can. Let's see. Where's my applause? Hey, hey, hey. That's even better. That was the one I was trying to press, but I like that one better. There's the one. God is able, right? Thank you, Jesus. That's what God can do, right? God can do the impossible. He has that dream for you. Keep the dream alive. The dream will carry you. Now, it's taken so much work, so much trusting to be at this place. My point was that when I was preaching to 3 people that were all asleep, I literally had people falling asleep. I guess I was boring that day. I've had people yell at me because I would sometimes drop some Spanish words, and I'm a bilingual person. And it would have been easy to just give up for all of us, right? It would be easy for us to give up when the response isn't what you expected. Tyler Perry was saying that when he first started, he would have all these theater and movies and all what he does with film and plays, and no one would show up. He was saying how one time he was driving to somewhere in Atlanta, I think. Was it Atlanta? Yeah. And it was like a super hot day, and yet it rained the night that he was supposed to open his play, and nobody showed up. And yet, I think he called his mom or his dad, and they encouraged him to not give up. And then the next day, there was a line outside of the venue, and he just began to tear up, like saying, "Thank you, God." I believe and declare that your dream and my dream will carry us. We just have to persevere. We have to not give up when you're in the gutter, when you're preaching to 5 people, when you get fired, when you don't have any money for even combo number 1. How about number 3 now? Yes, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. How about this one? Let's see. Where's the applause? No, that's not it. There you go. Yes, there it is. That's the applause. Right? God will make a way. Hey. God will make a way when there seems to be no way. We have to believe and declare in the goodness of God that he will see us through, that he will make a way. And when you're in the gutter, maybe you're in the gutter right now, I want to just encourage you to not give up. Let your dream carry you. What is your dream? Put it in the comments. Engage. Make sure that if you're on YouTube that you like, comment, subscribe. Help me out to get this algorithm to show this video to more people so that we can grow this message. We'll have more guests here on this podcast. We have the Victorious podcast, which happens, I think we're probably going to do it Monday or Tuesday nights. I'm not sure yet. And then I have this one that I do pretty much daily. And I'm also going to have more guests and get this thing even to be better, more exciting, with more conversations, more opinions, so that you can be even more equipped to never give up on your dream. Well, thank you again, everybody. I'll see you next time. Leave me a comment. Adios.